I'll never forget the sound of my daughter's voice on the phone that afternoon. It was trembling. Not with fear exactly, but with that tight kind of panic that only a kid feels when something they love is about to be ripped away from them. "Dad," she whispered, barely able to catch her breath. "They're here. They're trying to take Max." Max. Her golden retriever. Her best friend in the world. Her shadow since the day we rescued him from the shelter. The dog that slept by her bed every night and followed her to the barn every morning. I froze when I heard her words. And then I heard another voice in the background. That sharp, nasal tone I knew all too well. Karen. The self-appointed queen of our so-called homeowners association. She was saying things like, "This animal violates Section 12. You're in violation. The board has authority." And then, over her voice, came the sound of my daughter crying. I clenched my jaw. Because I already knew what was happening. Karen had finally lost it. She had called the police. And they were standing in my driveway, trying to take my daughter's dog. Now let me back up for a second. So you understand the kind of woman we were dealing with. Karen wasn't just any neighbor. She was the kind who lived and breathed rules. The kind who believed the HOA bylaws were carved into stone by God himself. She'd measure the height of your grass. She'd count how many cars were in your driveway. And if she saw so much as a garden gnome in your yard, you'd get a letter in your mailbox the next morning. But the thing that pushed her over the edge was Max. See, our ranch sat on the edge of HOA territory. We had wide open land. Space for horses, chickens, and yes, one very happy golden retriever. And Max loved it. He'd chase butterflies in the pasture. He'd splash in the creek. And he'd bark every time Karen's golf cart rolled by. That last part was what she hated most. She swore Max was dangerous. She swore he was unlicensed. She swore she'd have him removed. For months she'd sent letters. Then fines. Then threats. And every time I told her the same thing. You don't have the authority. This is my land. That dog isn't going anywhere. But Karen wasn't the kind of person to give up. No. Karen was the kind who would wait. Plot. Game. And finally, when she thought the timing was perfect, strike. And that's exactly what she did. So there I was, for minutes away from home when I got that call. And every muscle in my body went cold and tight. Because I knew if I didn't move fast, Karen was going to traumatize my daughter forever. She was going to take Max away in the back of a police cruiser. I didn't think twice. I hit the sirens. I hit the lights. And I floored it. Now here's the part Karen didn't know. The part that made this whole situation a ticking time bomb. I wasn't just a rancher. I wasn't just her neighbor. I was law enforcement. And I wasn't showing up as just a dad. I was showing up in uniform. The driveway came into view faster than I thought. The ranch gate was open. And there they were. 2 patrol cars parked crooked across the gravel. A couple of young officers standing stiff near their cruisers. My daughter, clutching Max's collar with tears streaking down her cheeks. And Karen. She stood there in her sun hat, clipboard in hand, tapping her pen like she was orchestrating the whole scene. Her lips twisted into that smug little smile that said, "Finally, finally I win." She didn't see me at first. Her back was turned. She was too busy barking orders. Too busy telling the officers what to do. Too busy pretending she was in charge. But the second my truck roared up the drive, lights flashing across the pasture, everyone's head turned. And the look on Karen's face when I stepped out in uniform? Was priceless. Her smug little grin evaporated. Her pen stopped tapping. Her eyes darted from me to the officers. And I could see it. That flicker of panic. That realization. That "oh no, I messed up" moment. "Dad," my daughter cried, relief flooding her voice. She wrapped her arms around Max like she was afraid he'd vanish. I gave her a nod. "Step back, sweetheart. I got this." Then I turned to the officers. And suddenly the whole energy shifted. Because I wasn't just another homeowner arguing with an HOA president. I was the law. And they knew it. I'll pause here. Because this was only the beginning. Karen had no idea that by calling the police, she had just triggered the biggest fight of her life. And I was about to put her HOA empire under a microscope she couldn't escape. But that's a story for the next part. Because what happened in the minutes that followed would set the stage for everything. The arguments. The showdown. And the moment Karen realized. Her power trip had finally met its match. The air in that driveway was thick. Not with heat. Not with dust. But with tension. You could feel it in the way the officers shifted uncomfortably, unsure of what to do now that I had arrived. You could feel it in the way Karen's smug little smirk cracked, even as she tried to hold her ground. And you could definitely feel it in the way my daughter clung to Max, silently begging me to fix this. I adjusted my hat, straightened my jacket, and let the weight of the silence do most of the talking. 4 minutes earlier, Karen had been running this circus. Now, every eye was on me. I took a slow step forward. The gravel crunched under my boots. The officers stood straighter, their hands twitching at their belts, but not in a threatening way, more in a nervous, caught between two worlds kind of way. They didn't want to be there. That much was obvious. Finally, one of them cleared his throat. "Oh, officer, we were just responding to a call." I held his gaze. A call about what? Before he could answer, Karen swooped in like a hawk that thought she'd spotted prey. Her hat tilted forward, her pen waved in the air, and her words spilled out like venom. "This man's dog is unregistered. This animal is a nuisance. This animal has been barking at residents, violating Section 12 of the HOA bylaws. And according to our authority, the dog must be removed immediately." Her voice was sharp enough to cut glass. She thought she was reciting scripture. But to me it was nothing but noise. I let her finish. I let her talk herself into a frenzy. And then, when she finally took a breath, I turned back to the officers. "You hear that?" I said, calm as stone. "That's not a crime. That's an HOA dispute. And last I checked, HOA bylaws don't override state law. Or county jurisdiction. Or common sense." The younger officer blinked as if he'd just been slapped with reality. The older one scratched his chin, his eyes darting from me to Karen, clearly regretting the decision to answer her call in the first place. Karen's face turned red. Her voice went up an octave. "You can't ignore this. You can't just let him keep a dangerous animal on this property." And that was when my daughter spoke. Her little voice, shaky but fierce, cut through all of Karen's noise. "He's not dangerous. He's my best friend. He's the only reason I even feel safe when you drive by our house. You're the dangerous one." The silence after that was heavy. Even the officers didn't know what to say. Max, bless him, seemed to understand the drama. He pressed closer against my daughter's legs, his big golden eyes locked on Karen with a protective glare. I put a hand on my belt and stepped closer to Karen. "Let me explain this to you real simple. This dog is licensed with the county. He is vaccinated. He is microchipped. And he lives on my property. That makes him my responsibility. Not yours. Not the HOA's. Mine." Karen's jaw clenched so hard I thought her teeth might crack. Her clipboard wobbled in her hand. And then she tried one last tactic: intimidation. Well then I'll just issue another fine. I'll take this to the board. You'll regret this." I didn't even blink. "Go ahead. Write all the fines you want. Mail them to my address. But you'd better make sure every single one of them can hold up in a courtroom. Because if you send me one more false violation, I will personally drag your entire HOA into legal review. And I guarantee you the county will not like what they find." The officers glanced at each other. One of them coughed into his hand like he was trying not to laugh. Karen heard it too, and the color in her face deepened from red to purple. She opened her mouth to fire back, but I held up a hand. "Enough. This conversation is over. These officers are leaving. You are leaving. And Max stays right here where he belongs." My voice wasn't loud, but it was final. And everyone in that driveway knew it. Karen tried to recover her dignity. She straightened her hat. She scribbled something on her clipboard, probably just to feel like she had the last word. And then she stormed off toward her golf cart, muttering under her breath about unfit neighbors and lawless households. The officers followed her, but not before giving me a quick nod of respect. One of them even whispered, "Sorry about this." She said it was urgent. I just nodded back. They weren't the problem. Karen was. As the engine started and the patrol cars rolled out of my driveway, my daughter finally let go of Max and ran into my arms. I knelt down, hugged her tight, and whispered, "It's okay. He's safe. I promise you he's safe." But as I held her, I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Because Karen had crossed a line tonight. She hadn't just harassed me. She hadn't just written up another bogus fine. She had tried to weaponize the law against my family. Against my daughter. Against her dog. And that was something I would not let slide. The sun dipped lower over the pasture, casting long shadows across the ranch. The calm was returning. But in my chest, the fire was only just beginning to burn. Karen thought she could control everyone with her rules. She thought she could bend the law to her will. She thought she could intimidate us into obedience. But what she didn't realize was that I wasn't just any dad. I wasn't just any neighbor. I was the badge. And now she had put herself directly in my sights. That night I sat down at my desk. I pulled out every letter, every fine, every bogus violation Karen had ever sent me. And I stacked them in a neat pile. Because if she wanted to play this game, I was ready to play it too. Only difference? I knew the rules better than she ever would. And when the time came, I was going to use those rules to end her reign of terror once and for all. The next morning, the ranch was calm again. Max was stretched out on the porch, tongue lolling happily, completely unaware of the storm that had almost swept him away. My daughter was inside, humming as she poured cereal into her bowl, her mood lighter now that she knew her best friend wasn't going anywhere. But me? I wasn't calm. I wasn't humming. I was focused. Because last night had made one thing very clear. Karen was no longer just a nuisance. She was a threat. And threats I dealt with. So I spread every single HOA notice she'd sent me across the table. Fines for grass height. Fines for parking my truck in the driveway. Fines for having a horse trailer visible from the road. Pages and pages of bogus citations. Some of them even contradicting each other. And at the bottom of the stack, the most ridiculous one of all. Unregistered dog. Immediate removal required. I took a deep breath and leaned back in my chair. Karen had built her entire little empire on intimidation. On paperwork. On making people too tired or too scared to fight back. But she had forgotten something very important. I wasn't just another rancher. I was the badge. And I knew exactly how to dismantle her game. By noon that day, I was sitting in the county office with a file thicker than a law book. I handed it to the clerk, who raised her eyebrows. "What's all this?" "Complaints," I said. "Every false violation this HOA has issued. Every threat. Every attempt to misuse authority. And last night they crossed a line. They weaponized law enforcement over a dog. My daughter's dog." The clerk flipped through the pages, her eyes widening. "This is a lot." "Oh, it's more than a lot," I replied. "It's a pattern. And it's time someone took a real look at what this HOA has been doing to people out here." She gave me a small nod. "I'll make sure this goes directly to the county board." That was step one. Step two? Calling a few friends who owed me favors. Friends who worked in oversight. Friends who could shine a very bright light on very shady practices. And step three? Making sure Karen knew she had officially messed with the wrong family. A week later, the showdown happened. The county had sent investigators. Karen didn't know it, but her entire HOA board was under review. Every one of their bylaws, every one of their fines, every one of their little rules, was being combed through line by line. But I wasn't satisfied waiting quietly. I wanted Karen to see that her power trip was over. So when she came rolling down the road in her golf cart, clipboard in hand, eyes darting toward my pasture like she was still searching for something to control, I stepped out to meet her. "Karen," I said flatly. She stopped her cart, lips pursed. "What now?" "Another violation?" she sneered, trying to sound confident. I smiled, but it wasn't the kind of smile that meant friendliness. It was the kind of smile that meant the game was already over. "No, Karen. No more violations. See your HOA? It's done. The county has everything. The fines. The bogus rules. Even the report about how you called the police to try and steal a family dog. It's all on record now." Her face paled. For once she had no smart retort. No smug little grin. Just silence. I stepped closer, lowering my voice so only she could hear. "You tried to traumatize my daughter. You tried to take her best friend away. And you used the law as your weapon. But here's the thing about weapons, Karen. If you misuse them, sooner or later they turn back on you." Her pen shook in her hand. Her eyes darted, desperate to find an escape. But there wasn't one. Not this time. By the end of that month, the HOA was finished. The board was dissolved. The bylaws were suspended. And Karen? She was stripped of her title, barred from ever serving in a neighborhood association again. The ranch was quiet after that. Peaceful. Neighbors who had been living in fear finally felt free to paint their shutters whatever color they wanted. To park their trucks wherever they pleased. To let their kids play outside without worrying about letters and fines. And my daughter? She never let Max out of her sight. She hugged him tighter than ever. She laughed louder than ever. And every time she looked at me, her eyes said the thing she couldn't quite put into words. "Thank you." One evening, weeks later, as the sun set across the pasture, I leaned against the porch railing and watched Max chasing fireflies. My daughter sat beside me, her laughter carrying through the warm air. I thought about Karen. About her clipboard. Her hat. Her endless rules. And the way she believed, with every ounce of her being, that she was untouchable. But in the end she'd been wrong. Because no one is above the law. Not even an HOA queen. And especially not when she comes after my family. I tipped my hat back, let out a long breath and whispered to myself, that's the last time anyone tries to take what's mine. And with that, I stepped back inside, finally closing the door on the longest battle we'd ever fought. Max was safe. My daughter was safe. And Karen's reign of terror? It was nothing but a memory. And that's how it all went down. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment to let me know what you think. Your support keeps these stories coming.